Many operators run a machine every day and don't even know what half these components are called. We're going to walk around this machine I have in my shop, and we're going to go over and I'm going to name out a bunch of the basic machines parts. I'm Jeremy with I Machine Services, and I want to go over the different components. So if you guys have any comments on videos, I would love it if you guys could drop them in the comments. So we're going to go over this machine so that you guys can see the different major components, and then we can understand better. This is kind of piggybacking off the last video where we drew stuff out, but here you can physically see them. So I'm going to open both of our doors. Okay, this machine does not have power on it, and it does not have air to it. So there's nothing I can do with it other than just actuate stuff that is actually working, stuff like that. But here we've got an idle wheel. Over here I have the drive wheel. As you can see, the drive wheel will not turn, even though the blade is not tight. The idle wheel will. Okay, so idle wheel will turn. Okay, on this machine here, we have two guide arms. We got a guide arm here and a guide arm here. We have guide caps. Okay, this is where our carbides sit. So if you can see here, we're going to have our carbides. So this is what the blade actually rides on. Okay, and this is what actually holds the blade straight. Okay, and there's what's called a backup carbide, which is this guy right here. In this case, they come in many different forms. This one is a triangle, okay? And then you basically, the back of the blade is going to ride up against that guy, okay? And then you basically don't want any non-carbide material hitting the blade. So if these carbides get damaged, it will affect the blade's life, okay? Now, see the blade on this one here is not turned 90 degrees, but I just want to point out that the blade is going to go from this point right here, the bottom of the wheel. It's going to turn 90 degrees into the guide. It's going to be held at 90 degrees between the two guide arms, the adjustable guide arm and the fixed guide arm. Okay, and this is where the cutting action happens. And then he's going to move from this point right here, and he's going to turn another 90 degrees. Okay, then he runs around both of the wheels. Okay, and then this system here, okay, we have the blade tension is a mechanical system. Okay, it's this screw you're going to tighten and loosen right here. Okay, and then this guy here has a stop that you tighten to just off the stop, and that's how you know it's correctly blade tensioned. Okay, we also have clamping system. So this guy has this jaw here and has this jaw here. This one here does not move. This one here ratchets back and forth, and then it clamps. There's a cylinder on the end. Okay, this is a pivot saw, so he raises like this. Okay, and then this is the pivot block back here. So this is the point at which it raises from. Okay, so we're going to pick you up and we're going to walk you around so you can see parts of the saw. Control panel, this is where you're going to have all your controls. This machine here, I'm going to go over basically, this is a late 80s, early 90s machine, so it is 35 years old. So a lot of this stuff is going to be outdated, but the concepts are still the same. Okay, so here we have a power switch. Okay, on this machine here, he does not have interlocks on the doors, but he does want the switches to be in neutral. So if they're not in neutral, it won't come on. Okay, then on this guy here, you have a motor switch, got a clamp switch. I have a lift switch. Okay, and then I have stuff for the feed vise, the clamp, and the feed. This machine did have an automatic table at one point. Okay, he also has stuff to do with the auto feed as well as a parts counter. Okay, the way this saw works, he's either lifting or he's falling back down and cut. Okay, so it's just one of those things. There is no stop unless you stop him. Okay, he has two pressure valves right here. This bottom one is for the clamp pressure. This determines how much pressure is in our clamping pressure. And this top one is the cut pressure. Okay, so as I crank up this knob, okay, this gauge would go higher and higher and it would put more air into our lift cylinder. Okay, as more air gets in the lift cylinder, okay, the lighter the head would get. Okay, and it can actually get so light that it will not drop, and you can even go more pressure, crank it, and it'll actually start to lift. Okay, because you're putting that much pressure back in the cylinder. So what you do is you bring it back down, you find what we call the balance pressure. Okay, balance pressure is going to determine where the head sits. It does not want to raise and it does not want to lower. Okay, And then once you found your balance pressure, what's going to happen is you're going to back off from that. You're going to make this gauge go lower. Okay, you're going to make the head heavier by taking air out of this lift cylinder. Okay, we have a secondary system cylinder. This is the control cylinder. Okay, this cylinder here has hydraulic oil in it. Now, again, this is an older system. And newer systems, they would have a flow control valve sitting right here that you adjust. You would adjust the flow control valve, and then you would adjust the pressure, and that's how you would set up your cuts for your regulator and different things like that. Okay, this guy here is a knob on top. Okay, as you open this knob, the head wants to fall faster and faster. As you close that knob, head wants to fall slower and slower. Okay, this is determining how much oil is escaping from this cylinder. Okay, let's walk around, see some more of the saw. Okay, so I mentioned here, we have our blade tension. Okay, so here I've got the panel off. Here you can see it's literally a screw system. Okay, as I turn this, we have a bronze nut in there, and it pulls this way or it pushes it that way. And that's what determines how tight it's going to be. Okay, here we can see the clamping system a little bit better. Okay, this style here is a ratcheting system, so I can lift this up and pull him, or I can just push him. Okay. On this machine here, this bar here is where the feed vise would mount. Okay, but we don't have the feed vise. Here we've got the back of the cylinders. Here I can see the lift cylinder. And then this guy, these older saws, they had a hard time lifting, so they have something called a booster cylinder. So this was an add-on cylinder to give it more basically surface area to lift. And then behind it is the control cylinder. Okay, now we're going to get into the drive system. Okay, this machine, okay, it had a motor pulley. It went out, and that's one of the reasons they got rid of the machine, because of the age of the machine. They didn't want to spend a few $1,000s on a motor pulley. Okay, so this is the drive motor. When you turn on the motor, this is what turns on. You got the electricity comes in through here. It turns on this motor. He spins. He has a pulley. Then we have a belt that I've seemed to have lost, and then that belt goes to this pulley here, which is your gear reducer pulley. Okay, and then you can see behind there you've got the gearbox. Okay, so this has an input shaft that goes in that way, and then the output shaft, I don't know if we can see it that well, is right there, but he pokes out. That's literally the output shaft of the gearbox sticking right out there, the drive wheel. Okay, so I'm going to see if we can get both of these going. So you can see, I'm going to turn this. Okay, and that's what turns the blade. Okay, so we spin this guy right here, and he turns. I don't know where the belt is. That is odd. Oh, the belt's right here. Okay, so this is the belt. So like I said, this is going to ride between these two pulleys. Okay, and like I said, we're missing a pulley, but he's going to ride between these two pulleys, different things like that. Now, this machine here, you see these this air hose looking thing. This was an add-on. Somebody added on the coolant lines, which is this guy. It's not how it's supposed to be, but it gives you the concept. You're going to have a drain pan right here where the coolant falls into. Okay, you would have a single line coming up here. It would then feed this guy, and then the coolant would come and it goes into both guide arms. So you got coolant right there at the guide arms, and then that's going to keep the blade cool, and it's going to get viscosity going, lubrication in the cuts. Okay, but also just so you know, this whole top section here is the head of the saw. Okay, and then the whole bottom would be the saw base. Okay, on the side here, we got some electrical components. This section over here, okay, that's going to be your junction box. That's generally where power comes in. This machine predates a breaker, so he doesn't have a breaker. A lot of times there would be a breaker sitting right here, a disconnect. The power would go in there for the disconnect, different things like that. And then on this machine here, he has a starter that's on the outside because he doesn't fit on the inside. The starter right here is what's going to run the motor. The starter turns on, it allows the three-phase electricity to pass through to the motor, and then the motor turns on. Okay, but that's what we have going on here. And then on this machine is an air saw. I don't know if you guys can see, we have our air solenoids are back here. Okay, we got a couple on the bottom. We have a PSV2 valve, which is basically a shuttle valve. Got a couple more air solenoids. But those are what are going to actuate. So we're going to use electricity, actuate those. They're always going to have air in theory. There's different plumbing. They're always going to have air. And then what happens is when you apply electricity, they actuate, and they allow air to pass or they stop allowing air to pass. And then that's how you're going to turn on stuff like your clamps and different things like this. And the last thing on this one is here. Here is your clamp cylinder. This guy here is what's going to pull. You see he's a relatively short stroke. You know, he's probably got, what, 4 inches that he's going to pull, and that's all the clamp stroke you have. So that's why you got to move the material, move this guy over there. If this was helpful, please hit like and subscribe. More bandsaw content is coming. Drop a comment. What type of saw are you running? What kind of shop you're in, as well as what kind of material you're cutting. If you're in the Gulf Coast region and need your bandsaw service, please give us a call or shoot us an email. I Machine Services in Houston, Texas. We travel where you need us. Links are below. You guys have a wonderful day. Thank you so much.